This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Ann Ortelee's Weekly Weather. I'm Ann Ortelee. I'm an astrologer here in New York at the Bright Red Desk. And this is the weekly weather for the weeks of August 6th to August 13th. Nodes are newly in Aries and Libra, very activated this week in another Hammer of Thor. Venus is retrograde. Mercury's in his shadow, going to go retrograde. And I think we have a Georgia indictment on Tuesday, August 8th. Maybe the 9th, but I think we get it on the 8th. Because I haven't looked at Fannie Willis's chart yet until like this week, and I'm like, oh, interesting chart. So I know some of you are like, oh, the politics. So I'm going to put a little section of politics at the end of the weekly weather, and I'm going to do that. I know when I was nagging you all to vote last election, and somebody went, you're going to get off the voting, right? You're going to get off the voting. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get off the voting. I'll be back again, though, when it's time to vote in 2024. But I am an Aquarius rising, so I'm really having trouble not doing politics. So in preference to those of you who really would like, just give me the weekly weather and none of the politics stuff, we're going to put it at the back. And I think I'll probably be separating it actually out into its own little mini podcast. But, you know, right now it's Mercury in his shadow, so we're figuring it out in Venus retrograde. So at any rate, we did have the indictment on Tuesday as promised. And I think we have the Georgia indictment on this Tuesday. And, you know, off we go into the week. Let's look at the energy of what's going on up there in the heavens so we can figure out what the heck we're doing down here on Earth. Okay, so here's our thing from the annual look ahead, and we're looking at the week of August 6th through the 13th. So we do see some activity there on August 9th, which is, you know, the indictment day, at least I think, but it's also pretty big energies. You know, it's Mercury trining Jupiter and Venus squaring Uranus, and there's just a lot of really active, plus a huge Hammer of Thor, which we're really getting our lessons on Hammer of Thors these days. As mentioned before, there's the nodes shifted into Aries and Libra, which has brought about a whole new change. You've been seeing it all over the place with, you know, now last week I think I'm losing track because the weeks are going fast. And last week I was on vacation and was trying to do a non-technology, which was really hard with the indictment coming down, but non-technology week off, you know, so I haven't answered emails, which I'll be getting to this week, but also when the nodes shifted, they kind of pull us in a whole new direction and kick us up. So Justin Trudeau announced he was separating from his wife, and, you know, we'll continue to see those unfold because we just went into this energy. And of course, Venus is in her retrograde. So she's asking us to look at all of our relationships and understand them in a new way and think about them in a new way, you know, because the energy wants us to start a new 8-year cycle, which we're going to start next Sunday when the Sun and Venus meet up. Now, I did a podcast, I did a weekly whatcha-hoozy thing. I spoke at an astrology meetup. And so one of the things I'm going to put out this week is the opportunity to listen to that presentation. I got it mailed to me by Danny, the astrology meetup here in New York, Danny Larkin, one of the people who runs it. So I haven't had a chance to go through it yet, but I will put it up for all of you and send a note out that it's there. You can go access it. So that will be coming because I do want to encourage you to do a ritual on the Sun-Venus conjunction when we get there, which is next Sunday. And it's a much more in-depth presentation. So at any rate, this new cycle that we're in is going to end January of 05. So think back to the earlier chapters, December of 04 to June of 06. For me, that was when I started writing my column, my first column. 86 to 87 was turning into a salesperson. 67 to 69 was shifting schools, going to a new school, kind of figuring out who I was. And then I wasn't around in 49. But some of you were. So think about what your changes were, because this cycle is the I am cycle. And I know the 67 one was big because I shifted schools and I went from being kind of a shy Virgo to going, hey, it's not that hard to talk to people. I can talk to people. And 86 to 87, turning into a salesperson, you know, my boss is like, you're selling all this stuff. Why don't you, I can pay you more if you turn into a salesperson. I'm like, money's good. I'll turn into a salesperson. And then, not that I was unpaid as a programmer, but you know, they evaluate the hunting and gathering skills are more rewarded. And then in 04, 06 was really getting my astrology out there and starting to talk about it. So now with this new Aries Libra, it's in my house of communication. So trying to get more communication out there in ways that people find meaningful and interesting. So more to unfold over that in the next year and a half. We're still working with Venus retrograde. She entered Leo in June. She entered her shadow June 19th. She went retrograde July 22nd. She's currently running retrograde until September 4th. And on August 13th, she has a Sun-Venus conjunction at 20 Leo, where she had it 4 years ago, and 4 years before that, and 4 years, so think in August, 4-year chunks, because she moves about a degree every 8 years. Think back to what was going on in your life at those times. You're now starting a new 8-year cycle. And so it's important to kind of go, oh, okay. And sometimes we see it in smaller, like if we look at Sofia Varga and Joe Manganiello, I'm not sure I'm saying his last name right, but they were together 8 years, married 7, right? So Venus cycles are 8-year cycles. For me, I've been shredding papers, and I ran into the first time my Venus star point from 15 was when I joined OPA. It was my first presentation for OPA. I went to Arlen Weiss's house up in Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and kind of think of them as the same. I know they're really not, but they're islands off Massachusetts. I always have to go that way. I do the same with New Hampshire and Vermont. They're the two tall, skinny states. Which one's which again? Yeah, so, I mean, I know Vermont's to the left and New Hampshire's to the right, I think. At any rate, as I say that now, I'm questioning it. So I started with OPA 8 years ago. And so this Venus star point, I just got a beautiful bunch of flowers from them because I'm stepping down from the board. I've been a treasurer for 7 years there. And a lovely video thing that I haven't had a chance to look at, but I know it's going to make me cry. So, but I said to Arlen when I saw her on Wednesday, I talked to her on Wednesday, I said, oh, 8 years ago I was at your house it was my new Venus star point. And so now I'm shifting my I mean, I love OPA, so I'm still going to support it. And what OPA is the Organization for Professional Astrologers, or Professional Astrology. I always get that Ers and E's wrong. So yeah, it's a great organization. I encourage you to join it. It has monthly lectures. It has a terrific magazine that gets published. In fact, earlier today, I listened to a wonderful lecture by Will Morris on medical astrology. So they have all different kinds. So the Venus star point, for me, marks a new 8-year cycle, because I met a lot of wonderful people and had a wonderful time the last 8 years. So that's our Venus. So think about you, August of 19, August of 15, August of 11, August of 17, of 7, go back in 4-year chunks. Mercury retrograde, we have, 3 times a year. This one's in Virgo, though. He's very productive when he's in Virgo. He entered his shadow on August 4th, and he stations retrograde on the 23rd, and then he goes direct on the 15th. So now some of you are going, uh-oh, indictments this week? Well, Fani Willis has Mercury retrograde by progression. Nowhere. So it's an energy of how do we proceed? Because when it goes into the retrograde, we all start thinking about things, connecting with people from our past, hearing from people we haven't heard from in a while, thinking about, ooh, I wonder what's going on with that person, and then they call you. So this is when you hear from people from your youth, your ghosts come back and want to talk to you. And they're going to say very important things because this Mercury retrograde is happening in the middle of a Venus retrograde. And Mercury and Venus are kind of sitting down like an old family reunion. And I can't tell you how many clients I have going on family reunions or going back to visit family in the old country. because they couldn't get there until, because of COVID, and last summer was kind of crazy. And, this summer everybody's kind of planning, but a lot of people are going back and connecting with old family relatives. There's a lot of weddings, which I'm always curious about with the Venus retrograde. And again, it's not a bad thing if you have Venus retrograde in your chart, natally or by progression gone retrograde, no problem. And really what it means is it helps you reevaluate and look at things, understand things. Mercury retrograde has you think about things in a different way. Hear the story. Remember when we did? They go, I don't have any memory of that at all. Or you do remember it and you kind of do old home week. So talk to your ghosts. They're going to be coming around until September 30th. Next up, today, the sun squared Jupiter. Now notice the sun is at Leo, 14 Leo, and Jupiter is at 14 Taurus. They are both on world points. So that's a big deal when the sun is on a world point, which happens, there's four big world points. One is 0 of the cardinal, one is 7.5 of the mutable, 22.5 of the cardinal, and 15 of the fixed. So a degree before, a degree after, and the degree of. So the sun right now is 14-16, squaring the Jupiter, a little bit of excess, kind of a fiery energy, very perky. And it also is what we call an opening square, meaning the sun is squaring Jupiter. Back when they met up in Taurus time, the sun was saying to Jupiter, what are we doing? And Jupiter goes, we're going to grow everything in your Taurus house this year. Last time I was here was 12 years ago. I'm going to make that Taurus house nice and big and fat, or juicy. And so you're juicing it up. And so now the sun turns back to Jupiter and says, how's it going? Jupiter goes, good, we're doing good. Because you can see there's also a lot of blue lines in the chart. Those mean trines. That means the planets are working together. So even though it's a square, and of course, a lot of times in the summer, there tends to be a little more margaritas, a little more nachos, some guacamole. Those guacamole chips are pricey. You put them in your calorie counter and they go, it's a lot. Only 10 chips is how many calories? But the sun squared Jupiter gives us that expansive energy. We also have Mercury, Athena, and Mars have moved past the opposition to Saturn that they were working with before. And so now they're freely talking. And we are having that Sun-Venus, the Sun-Venus Hammer of Thor breaking up. The Venus Hammer of Thor is breaking up because she's going backwards. She was not the Hammer of Thor, Finger of God. She was talking to Pluto and Neptune, and now she's moved out of orbit. She'll be back. She'll be back there that first week in October. All right, next up, Hammer of Thor on Tuesday. Now this is a big one because Pallas Athena and Mercury are joined at 13 degrees and 40 minutes of Virgo. And they are sesquiquadrating, which are stressful energies. They are taking the square and the semi-square and putting it together, which is kind of a stressful energy of 135 degrees. And they're sesquiquadrating Pluto in Capricorn and the North Node of Fate in Aries, newly entered into Aries. Now, when I was looking at this energy, I do a daily podcast for my Patreon subscribers. And I was saying, this is actually an axe. It's not really a hammer because the North Node is, and some people don't even like nodes and, in planetary configurations, but I like my nodes. So the North Node in Aries is a blade. It's metal, it's sharp. So I'm not like a hammer, I'm like a nice axe. You ever seen an axe? When I was a Girl Scout, we used to have to cut things with axes. You put the thing and you'd put a little splitter in, you'd whack the splitter and it would go, or you'd whack the axe into it and then you bang it on the stump till it broke. You had to go out. I had to go out and cut wood. I was a real Virgo child and harvest sumac trees and burn them as a Girl Scout. So that it's an axe. It's actually, we're gonna call it the Hammer of Thor, but it's actually the axe of Thor. And so you can see the hammer right there in the sky. That's on Tuesday and Wednesday. It forms Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So it's in the place. Now we also see simultaneously in this Hammer of Thor configuration, we still have the sun at the world point squaring Jupiter at the world point that I just talked about a minute ago, which is public information coming out. And then we also have the Mercury and Pallas Athena joined in Virgo, and they are the handle of Thor. But we also have Mercury and Pallas Athena trining Jupiter in Taurus, right, on a world point. So this is a big deal. And this is a pretty nasty little hammer. Now last week's was not so much fun either, but this one's juicy. So we're going to see what happens. And we're getting used to these hammers, but that's what makes me think that's indictment day, Tuesday, Wednesday in Georgia. Next up, we have on Wednesday, we have Venus square Uranus. Surprise, surprise. Now, Venus is retrograde. She's squaring Uranus in Taurus. And this is not on a world point, but again, the energy is pretty potent, and it happens bright and early with Uranus on the midheaven, and that's on Wednesday morning. That's why when I was looking, and I'm like, I think they get voted in on Tuesday, but they announce it on Wednesday. That's kind of my thought. But, you know, working with, I don't have a time chart for the Georgia DA yet, so we'll talk about that later at the end of the program. But anyway, this is also for you thinking back on what was going on, or what's going on around love. Now, this is a biggie, so we'll have some big divorces in the news. You may, in your own life, say, hey, you know, I've been thinking about our relationship, and I've been thinking about what I want to do about it, because now the planets are running a little more free, so we can have the aha moment, which we had, and now we figure out how to handle the aha moment. And that's our job. Now we are going from a new moon, we're going from full moon to new moon. So it's releasing phase until we get to that new moon in a couple of days, couple of weeks. So that energy is zipping along. So we'll see what happens as we get towards it, because there's a real forward motion in terms of energy, and also there's a psychological orientation going on here, because the moon, Venus is squaring Uranus, but the moon is squaring the sun. So it's kind of like I'm making this psychological breakthrough or opportunity or understanding what I need to do, revise, revisit to get this going. And so it's a very strong energy. A little bit of contention, because you can see Aries, the north node, is right next to the north node. That's the witch. Invite the witch to the party, as Georgia Stasis always says, because if you invite her, at least you know what she's doing. And don't get mad at her. Her job is to be the witch. And it also is getting a trine, you know, from the sun in a few days. So, you know, we're going to be entering a little bit of contention, even as we figure out some very important things about what's important to us and what's important to our womb. We also see Juno opposite Pluto. Juno is the planet of partnership, opposite Pluto. What's the triangle in your relationship? You, another person, a third person. You, another person, a third thing. And the third thing can be drugs, it can be alcohol, it can be something. But this is also revelatory of who are the people involved. And what are the people involved going to be doing? So that's an energy as part of this Venus square Uranus. Remember, this happens every year, but it doesn't usually happen on a year when Venus is retrograde. But it also can be you hear from an old love calls you back, and you're like, ooh, an old love or a past life love. I have a student who's currently met somebody in their prenatal eclipse and her prenatal eclipse, and it's a Venus retro, you know, it's Venus and, you know, all these nodal things. And I'm like, oh, this is a big one. This is a big one. She goes, I've been waiting for this my whole life. I'm like, I think this is a big one. Have fun, because of that intensity. And of course, that Venus star point is so much about finding love and finding what's value and passion to you, right? Next up on Wednesday, Mercury trines Jupiter. Now, Mercury's in Virgo. He's hanging out with Pallas Athena. We still have the Hammer of Thor, or the axe of Thor, if we want to do the axe analogy, chop, chop, in our lives. We have the axe of Thor in the heavens. And we also have Mercury trining Jupiter, which is communication and clarity and speaking and talking. And there actually is, because Mercury Athena is also trine Jupiter. You can see the two of them are kind of hanging out there. And Mars was past the trine. He had the trine last week. So there's an energy here of speaking, and Jupiter again is still on a world point. So we're public speaking, and again, learning things, kind of a forward motion. That's Wednesday. Then we have Jupiter trine Pallas Athena, which happens on Friday. And Pallas Athena moves a little slower than Mercury, and they are together Tuesday, Wednesday. Pallas Athena, of course, rules the justice system. And Pallas Athena also is Athena, Athens. She runs the Acropolis in the top of Athens. And the Greeks worshipped her as a strategic visionary warrior, a woman warrior. So, yeah, so Pallas Athena there is trining Jupiter. That happens on Friday. So we see a lot of energy there in terms of communication, connection, finding things out, learning things, and settlements. I have quite a few people that are currently re-engaged in settling lawsuits, legal disputes, partners failing to show up in proper ways for settlements. We agreed on this and then you didn't do it, so I brought you back to court. And of course, Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde, you broke the terms of the deal. So this is that too. It's like if you need to go after somebody to collect a debt or get some money or get something that you're owed, and more importantly, if you owe somebody something, and I know I owe people a couple of things, so it's on my list to get done this week, this is a time to do it. Also an excellent time for reevaluating your will, reevaluating your finances, reevaluating, because Mercury retrograde wants us to review, Venus retrograde wants us to assess. And so these are really excellent. This is a really excellent month for all that kind of stuff. In my case, I hit up a couple people to be my healthcare proxy and pull the plug on me. One of them is a Capricorn Virgo, Maria, who I love. She's a nurse. She's tough. We always discuss you give them how do you want to give them? I always ask them if they want to know. And I say, yeah, told me you wanted to know. I'm like, oh, Maria, that's your Capricorn. I'm a Virgo. I worry. What if I tell them the wrong thing? And then I have a friend who I've known for many years who's now a neurologist. So she's my other plug puller. So I figure I got a nurse and a neurologist. I'm good. But that's mine. And then I got to call my lawyer and get that all updated. So this is that kind of energy with Jupiter trining Pallas. What legal matters do you need to do? Do you need to register your car? Do you need to change your driver's license? Do you need to adjust your name, change your bank account, all this kind of stuff? This is excellent time for revising, revisiting. I have to turn over the OPA accounts to the new treasurer, put her on as a signatory, take me off. It's that kind of Mercury trining Pallas Athena. What are the legal things you have to comply with? And so this week has excellent aspects for that. And then, of course, on Sunday, we have the Sun-Venus conjunction. It's a Venus star point, and this happens once every 4 years in Leo. It happens every 9 months, 9.5 months in the sky. And again, I'll put a little thing out there. We'll cover it in more length on Sunday next week. Because it's a really potent little energy, and I'll have a longer, I think we did 2 hours or something like that in the meetup in astrology. So that's on the list to go up this week too. Okay, all right, so the sun this week runs from 13 Leo to 21 Leo, and the big aspects, as we mentioned already, are the sun square Jupiter. The sun is also sextile Ceres, so if you're trying to do some partnerships or join groups, good time to do it. And the sun is sextile Vesta, excellent time to make changes around your home and hearth. And then the Venus-Sun conjunction, which is launching a new energy. Next up, Mercury this week goes from 19 Virgo to 16. Now he's going, sometimes he goes 21 degrees in a week, right? Here he's only going 4 degrees. Mercury is very slow. So he's very methodical. He's really helpful in getting stuff accomplished because he's slowing down for his retrograde later in the month. So he goes from 12 to 16 and a half, and he meets up with the Hammer of Thor, papers, Mercury rules papers, and he's hanging out with Pallas Athena, and she moves justice, so papers of justice. You kind of get where I'm getting the indictment. Astrology, very basic, very straightforward right up there in the heavens. And Mercury is in a sesquiquadrate to that north node, the axe, instead of the Hammer of Thor. And then Mercury meets up with Pallas Athena. That happens on the 8th. And then Mercury has a sesquiquadrate with Pluto on the 9th. That's why we're looking at the hammer swinging, the axe of Thor swinging. Yeah. And then Mercury has a trine to Jupiter at the end of the week on the 9th. Or it has a trine to Jupiter on the 9th. That's actually in the middle of the week. All right. Venus this week, also moving very slowly because she's going backwards. And she's going from 22 to 20. Pokey, pokey, pokey. She has a square with Uranus today. And she's kind of kicking stuff up and encouraging. It's a square with Uranus on the 9th, rather, not today. And that's, she's kind of happy. She's not really doing a lot up there. She's just watching. Mars this week's going 3 degrees. He's going from 1859 to 21 and a half. And he is squaring Vesta on the 10th. So he wants to clean up the home and hearth and get stuff moving. Jupiter moving very slow, but does have a trine to Pallas Athena. That happens on the 11th, which is the Friday. And then the couple of quintiles, there is a big health aspect on Sunday and Monday. So any health aspects, go to the store or go to the doctor, go to the urgent care. I had somebody go to urgent care and they said to her, if this doesn't change by this, go and get it fixed. And go to the hospital. So it didn't get better. So she went to the hospital and they're like, we're glad you came in. This is not good. So don't fool around with health matters this week. And then Pluto has his leg with Athena in the Hammer of Thor on the 9th. And then big relationship reveals on the 13th with Juno opposite Pluto. So I thought you were like this, and you find out they're not. Hammers of Thor, they're not easy aspects. They do bring things to light. And we also have relationships really reaching crossroads, which I didn't put in. But Juno is squaring the nodes of fate. She's moving into that grand cross in the sky that's still up there. I mean, we haven't been talking about it so much because there's been other stuff going on, but it's kind of like the bass note. If you've ever been in a hotel and they have a disco and you can hear the beat underneath. That grand cross is still up there, is the beat underneath which we're all operating, and it is making people feel stressed. So your job with feeling all this stress is to kind of look at it and go, okay, I'm really feeling the anxiety here, and it's okay. It's okay. It's not, there's not a lot of words in the sky. There's not a lot of air in the sky. So it's very much feeling it in the body and a feeling it in emotional spaces. And the planets that are in the sky are pretty fixed. So they're not moving. It's like you're a little sludgy or you're a little lethargic, right? Okay, so this week we have the moon today is in Aries, and it goes void Monday morning, bright and early, at 12:13 a.m., and it goes void with a square to Pluto, hard aspect over the weekend. Then it goes into Taurus the 7th, Monday the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th, going void at 6:39 in the morning on the 9th, going into Gemini at 9:05 on Wednesday morning. The moon goes void at 6:39 with a lovely trine to Pluto. So the moon in Taurus trines Pluto. So stuff that happens on, the Taurus moon, which is Monday, Tuesday, is flowing. Gemini is Wednesday. Moon goes into Gemini Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and it goes void at 1:27 p.m. on Friday with a square to Neptune. Again, transformation, ideas, but squares to Neptune have a little bit of deception. And then the moon is void for 5 hours Friday afternoon from 1:27 to 6:52 when it goes into Cancer. It'll be in Cancer Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, going void at 3:46 in the morning with an opposition. So the busy days of the week are the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You can get stuff done, but it can dissolve because moon, or you have to do it again. You have to do it twice. Some doing it twice energy, redoing it. The hard days this week are Tuesday and Wednesday. Those are the days with a lot of stress in the heavens, a lot of stress emotionally, and it's physical stress. It's really feeling it because there is no air in the heavens, or very next to no air, not much up there. And so it's really feeling it in your bodies. So just be kind of gentle with yourself on Tuesday and Wednesday because the energy is very psychically stressful. And then the 12th is quiet, which is nice. We can use a quiet Saturday. And then Sunday the 13th has the Venus star point, and it has lovely aspects. So schedule some time on next Sunday, for the, like a ritual that helps support what kind of love you want to bring into your life for the next 8 years. And we'll talk about that next week. But also, I'm going to end with, in my case, I went, oh, wow, that's what I was working on, was the OPA people when I found those papers when I was shredding them. I just want you to know, 17 bags of stuff. I shredded 17 bags of stuff. My taxes from 2000 to 2016 have gone out of my house. All the receipts, I'm a Virgo, I keep everything. 17 bags of stuff. So it was pretty impressive, actually. Thanks to Joni Pope, who has been my, what are we going to call her? My organizer extraordinaire. So anyway, she just kind of brings me shit and I just sit there and go through it. So anyway, I was going through it and I ran into the OPA stuff, which was started in 15. But I remember in 19, I talked to both of my assistants on August 19th, and it was my assistant Rachel's birthday. She's a Leo, born in August. And I said, so what were you guys doing in 15? And so Rachel said, well, I decided I wanted to kind of, start get my life in order and kind of start looking for a nice guy because I wanted to get married and have a family. And then she had met Spencer in that 4 years, and they were getting married in 2 months. And now she has Sheena, lovely Sheena, her beautiful daughter. She and Spencer have a nice house and happy living, all that kind of stuff. Rose I was in a bad play in Baltimore, and I decided I could write a better play. So she had finished the play, and it was getting looked at for off Broadway, which got delayed a little bit because of the pandemic, but happened. And it did open downtown. And now she's working on another play and another restaging of her show. So these are very, very big. This is a very big aspect. So you really want to think about, like, what is it that your heart desires? In Rachel's case, it was a wonderful man, and she met Spencer, who is one of the nicest people you'd ever want to meet in the entire world, as is Rachel. And they have a beautiful daughter and a couple of really nice cats, which they had before they had Sheena. And Rose, it was activating her desire to be a writer, which she'd always kind of held. But then, it was the star point came along and whispered in her ear. So that's the other thing to watch for this week. Watch for what whispers in your ear and says, this is what you're supposed to do. And listen to it, because that's how astrology can work for you. All right. So with that in mind, I was listening to what was whispering in my ear. You know me, old Anne and her politics. All right, so this is the official launch. It's going to be incorporated in here. I was reminded when I was young, I don't remember what magazine it was, but they had, Ms. Magazine was nurtured into existence in the inside of another magazine. And I don't remember who was the launching Ms. Magazine person, but they said, hey, we're going to do this magazine for women. It was the 70s. I was in high school. And late 60s, early 70s, and it was, I want to say maybe New York Magazine, but I don't remember for sure. But anyway, they launched it. So I'm going to launch this in this column, in this weekly weather, and we'll see where we go. So this is the first official astrology and political analysis starting on August 6th, part of this Venus star point. All right, so we did talk about Indictment Day. Now we're going to do a little more astrology. And if you don't like my astrology, hang up. We'll see you next week. But this is really cool stuff, just want to say. All right, so we have Indictment Day, which I said would be last week on Tuesday. Question mark, getting a little more bold. So of course, it gets to the end of the day and I'm like, are they not going to do it today? And then old Jack Smith showed up, 5:17 p.m., dropped the indictment. This is the chart for the indictment for Washington, D.C., August 1st, 5:17. Ann was sitting here and it went, oh, indictment's coming through. Cast the chart immediately, because that's what astrologers do. I remember Julian was a wonderful astrologer here in New York, and he told the story about, his wife coming down the stairs and saying she wanted to get a divorce, and he looked at his watch, and you're like that. It's just kind of it's a bad thing. But anyway, not a bad thing. It's what astrologers do. So anyway, this is the chart for the indictment, and we will go through it in a little more because what I want to do this week is kind of introduce you to the players, and then we will analyze it. But this is an important chart. So the first thing I noticed when I look at the chart, and one of the most important things, because think in the course of 24 hours, the entire heavens rise and set, right? First thing I noticed was that lovely little 22 Sagittarius rising. And I went, uh-oh, because I know that degree, all right? And at any rate, so again, we're going to do overview, kind of, take you through the process, and then we'll build on it. It'll be kind of a weekly astrology lesson on the politics. So if you don't like politics, but if you do, it'll include a lot of chart analysis too. All right, so I noticed that 22. The rest of the stuff, I knew we were having it, the Hammer of Thor, all that things we talked about last week. But what that 22 Sag rising is the fixed star Ras Al Hagoo, right? See it there? I may not be saying that right, but Ras Al Hagoo, right there, that little guy. And I went, oh my God, Ras Al Hagoo there. Ooh, 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 ooh. Of course, we have some other stars which are nice, and we can look at them in a bit. But the Ras Al Hagoo is our little secret star that we're all going to watch for these next year and a half, 2 years, 3 years, however long these trials take. Donald Trump, this is his chart. Notice his moon there in Sagittarius. See it? What degree is it? 21. What does he have? He has the moon on Ras Al Hagoo, right? Al Hagoo, however you say it. And then he has the south node on it also. Now, the south node is an addictive energy. Now, he has ascendant on Regulus, right? Which is the king star, and that is Leo rising. And so Donald has a Leo rising, right? There it is. And his ascendant and his Mars trine Ras Hagoo and the south node. Now, a couple points. And I say this with some trepidation because I realize this can be, this is where we're going to get into some politics. But you remember back to 1995, 96, there was the trial of the century, that century. What's the O.J. Simpson trial? O.J. Simpson was a Leo rising in California. He was born in San Francisco. And I remember when O.J. Simpson, I was studying astrology at the time. And my astrology teacher, a very excellent astrology teacher, would always go, now, just remember, it's Mercury retrograde. Just remember, it's Mercury retrograde. And of course, we had the O.J. Simpson trial happen. And America was very divided, right? When the verdict came in. So Donald famously said, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, Mars in the first, and they wouldn't arrest me. That's the Leo rising. That's the power of the Leo rising. Donald also has Jupiter stationed. See a little S? So his Jupiter's in Libra. Libra is the law, stationed. So he kind of stops the law. Astrology is very literal. But he also has this moon and the south node on Ras Al Hagoo, right? So we see that. So we go, okay, that chart for the indictment, because Ras Hagoo is on the ascendant right on Donald's moon and Sag. Now, one of the things that they talked about in the trial, or that's been noticed, is that they're using a Civil War, a Ku Klux Klan, actually, law that was established after the Civil War because the KKK rose up to stop voting. And his father was famously arrested in New York at a KKK rally, Ku Klux Klan rally. And for those of you younger in my audience, Ku Klux Klan after the Civil War, when the people that were enslaved were set free by the Emancipation Proclamation, there were people that were like, we don't want them voting. So they put in a whole bunch of laws, and they would ride up to your house and they would put a cross there. They would burn the cross. They would hang you. I mean, it was nasty. Remember, back then, women couldn't vote. We didn't get the vote until the 1920s, right? It was the men they were going after. But here we see the moon in Sagittarius. So Sagittarius is foreign to you. Now, we know he's married 3 women that are foreign, and they're, you know, a New Yorker with a girl from Alabama or wherever Marla Maples from. That's a foreign marriage, you know, North with the South, and Ivanka and Melania, both from foreign countries. But Sagittarius is also different races. People of different ethnic backgrounds to you, people of different belief systems in you. And he has the moon on the South Node on Ras Al Ghul. And his father was famously sued a long time ago for not renting apartments to people of color, any color. He didn't discriminate just blacks, but anybody, any minority, anybody with a shade on them. He would put a little C on their file. And so he was famously sued for not, and he had a lot of apartment buildings. Dad had a lot of apartment buildings in Queens. That was the original part of the real estate family. So Donald is a Nepo baby. At any rate, this moon on the South Node and on Sagittarius, you know, one of the things we have noted, or has been noted, is his racism, and moon on the South Node, his misogyny towards people in general, women in general. And so that group, you know, famously coming down the escalator, calling Mexicans rapists, and all of the stuff that he's done. So, you know, natal chart tells you the story of the person, shows the promise, the natal promise. So, not giving you a hard time on this, just going to talk to you about observations that thousands of astrologers have made over the years. And there is a case to be made where if you've got, you know, I was talking to someone and they were complaining that the person had a moon square Mars, and in Donald's case, he has a Mars trine the moon, right? So the whole I can assault them because I'm famous, I'm a king, right? But somebody had said, well, because Nero had it. And they said, well, he must have had trouble with his mother. And he was like, well, Nero killed his mother. You know, that's what he did. And so here with this Mars trine the moon, that's always an interesting aspect that you want to, when you see that in a chart. Again, this is astrology, piecemeal, fragmented, working. But also looking up here, he has a Venus-Saturn aspect, Venus-Saturn conjunct. That's what gives him his thin skin in Cancer, answering to that moon on the South Node. Very sensitive to criticism. And that Venus-Saturn is, I mean, I have it. But anyway, it's sensitive. It's a sensitive aspect. And it does have a love of food. And we know Donald likes his hamburgers. So at any rate, Ras Al Ghul, that's the one where I started. Next up, he's got the moon on it. He has the South Node on it. He also has Regulus on it. So the part I just said about the O.J. Simpson thing, we're going to have that again because we're having the Saturn return of the O.J. Simpson trial, which had everybody in America glued to their TVs. And I am willing to bet $5 right now that that trial will be publicized. So we're going to have an interesting journey together as a country as we watch that. And so that's something to also take into consideration in terms of how you want to work with this energy. Also notice the Sun Uranus here. So we're going to watch for that Sun Uranus signature because he's going to pull in people with a Sun Uranus aspect. He was born on an eclipse. He was born on a almost full moon, not quite. So it's technically a Virgo shape because it's still a gibbous. If another hour later would have been the eclipse itself. but he's a Virgo. Virgos are also famously thin-skinned. So we have Rasa Gul with the nodes on them. Now, from the Astrology King's website, and what he did, and it's a great website for looking up any fixed stars, totally recommend it. The fixed stars have been observed for years and years and years, and he has a lovely display on it. And I just cut and pasted the story of Rasa Gul from his website. But these are books that I have in my library. Fixed star, but I was taking it from him, so I gave him credit. Fixed star Rasa Gul gives misfortune through women, perverted tastes, and mental depravity. Now, mind you, this is astrologers. This isn't me. It is of the nature of Saturn and Venus, which is what Donald also has. Remember, a chart will show us things 3, 4, 5 times, so you don't miss the story. Slovenly, very immoral, shameless, revolting, mean, sorrows and love. That's from the Fixed Stars and Constellations in Astrology by Vivian Robeson. The quote pages are quoted. The star Rasa Gul is also on the head of the snake in the asteroid in the constellations. Is of the nature of Venus, as is Ortelee, but these stars have been associated with excesses, portending perverted morals, mental depravity, and misfortune through women. Now, he's got a woman judge in Washington. He has a woman judge in Florida. He has a woman prosecutor in Georgia, and he has the Attorney General in New York, another woman prosecutor. So, yeah. And that is from George Noonan's book. Next up, Rasa Gul in the head of the snake charmer from Elspeth Ebentine is the head of the snake charmer. It has a Saturn-like character, and some of the undesirable Venus qualities are also present. Now, remind you, he has a Saturn-Venus conjunction. Connected with these are Neptunian tendencies, making the native especially prone to infections caused by toxins. People thus tend to medical or hallucinatory drugs, stimulating food, too much good living, and an overindulgence in alcohol. Now, he famously does not drink because his brother died of alcoholism, but he definitely has an indulgence in good living. There is danger of insect bites, snake bites, or assault from animals or rabid dogs. If it's conjunct the moon, which it is in his chart, Mars or Neptune, the native is very prone to infections in general and to epidemic infections. Now, remind you, the leader of the country, we get their chart when they lead us, right? And so we had an epidemic under him. Now, I'm not saying, you know, again, as above, so below, as without, so within. I'm not saying he caused the epidemic, but epidemic infections is part of the thing. And of course, the moon is the people of the country. So we all had that epidemic roll through. Rasa Gul, derived from the head of the snake handler, also means the head of the snake, charmer, with the implications that the doctor is not fighting with the creature, but actually has control over it. So if you remember those old movies where they would have the cobra come out and they would play them, they would play the musical instrument, I don't know what flute, was a flute or something, and the snake would dance. Remember those movies? There we go, the head of a snake charmer. And since this is the head star, the note is one of control by the mind, not by brute strength. That is with the Venus-Saturn theme. Venus-Saturn theme is still with us from Living Stars by Dr. Morse. Rasa Gul, again, all this is, you know, Astrology King has wonderful, wonderful, wonderful listings of the different fixed stars. And I'll Google them because I don't have them all memorized. But this one I know. Moon conjuncted, which is what Donald has. Public prominence in religious matters. He did get the religious right to follow him. Favorable for Cain. The native is prone to infections in general and epidemic infections. It also causes discord, sedition, conspiracy against princes and rulers, and revenge from enemies. But it also frees captives and helps with building. So prison pardons, you know, for his compadres, and then, of course, whatever you want to call that thing we had on January 6th. It also, with the moon, is plan, so travel, and go to war. So there we have Donald. Now, of course, now that he's been indicted, we have his lawyer showing up. And this guy was around, so of course I looked him up. I don't have a time yet for him. This is John Laura's chart. He was born on Long Island, February 13th, 1962. And you can see he was born on a south node eclipse. He's a Sun-Jupiter guy, right? So a lot of times we say of Aquarians, they have a story with the parent, either Aquarius moon, the mother, Aquarius sun, the father. They have a story with that. He has a moon in Gemini. We know that'll definitely be a Gemini moon, and Donald is a Gemini sun. And he also has Uranus opposite the sun. Remember I said with Donald, he's a sun Uranus. So we're going to look for signatures where the sun and the Uranus hang out together. So he has that. And so he's born on the Sun-Uranus opposition. Donald's born on the Sun-Uranus conjunction. And we'll be watching because all of a sudden he's on all the shows. We see him everywhere. And we'll be watching for him for, rectifying events. And I'll go work on his chart this week. But notice he's born on the Sun-Venus star point. Right, see that there? Sun and Venus joined. As we're about to have one in the sky over here at 20 on his north node of fate. So this trial is going to make Mr. Laura famous. He's already, I guess, fairly well known as an attorney, but also interesting energy. And so when we look at his fixed stars, look at that. With Uranus on Regulus, which is the King's star, and Uranus parallel Ras Habul. So what do we know about John? Now, I mind you, I was watching him talk and just looking at his face and going, aren't you a little charmer? Right? And then I went and got this and I'm like, oh, he's a snake charmer. Got it. So here, again, this is why a lot of times people don't like astrology, because it does tell us these things. And again, not judging, just given the information that the chart has. Everybody has good and bad, how they use it. And this guy's clearly really smart, got a great Mercury. He's a Mercury Saturn, same aspect, interesting, that DeSantis has. DeSantis is a Mercury Saturn in Virgo, but this energy with that Sun Jupiter and Venus, very charming, very, very charming. And with the moon trine, grand trine in air. But Uranus working for the king of deviance, because Uranus is there, and that Uranus is at 28 on Regulus on Donald Trump's ascendant, and that's where Ras Habul is by declination. Can't make this astrology stuff up. Next up, I got Jack Smith. Now we've been looking, finally Glenn Thrush published his birthday. I read a few places he was born in Nebraska. We don't know for sure, but this is not a live chart. But having watched him show up and talk, and having watched him run in and out of the room, and knowing he's a triathlete, and he does these, which is where the water and the bike and this running, and that's certainly that Pluto, Jupiter, and Uranus in the first on the south node. So I'm giving him this, and again, we never knew his name. I mean, people knew of him for his work, but we didn't know him until he showed up on the scene. So I'm giving him a Virgo rising of 6.5, 7, and that was also the first time we ever heard him speak. I used that Saturn on the descend, and he walked out, he gave us that 2-minute thing, and he left. That was the Florida indictment. So I've been watching it. Notice he is a Gemini also, like Donald is. And he is got a very smart little Mercury. They all have, interestingly, they all have Mercury retrograde. He has Mercury retrograde. What's his name? John Loria has a Mercury retrograde. And their Mercuries are trine, so that'll be fun. Jack Smith also has a Sun-Venus conjunction, or Venus-Saturn conjunction. And of course, the North Node is on his Venus in Aries. So that's him getting pulled into this story, and we'll spend more time looking at it. He has his moon in Aquarius at 26. Aquarius, which is very much the degree of the U.S. moon. So the U.S. moon is 26 Aquarius. So this is the public trial. Suddenly, everybody's talking about Jack Smith. And he also has, you can see here, a kick-ass finger of God in there. See it? Coming from Uranus and Virgo, over here to the moon, over here to the Venus. This guy has a very formidable chart. He also has Mars in Sagittarius, out of bounds, retrograde. He does things in unusual manners with the Mars Mercury, really able to follow the threads. And also Mars is on a world point. So, we're going to know of him, and then he will leave and go off and do his thing. He's in for the fight, and then he's gone. But he does have a finger of God in his chart where God said, hey, go do that. And when Merrick Garland announced him, he wasn't there to say I'm in, because he had a bike accident. And of course, that certainly counts with the Uranus transit that he's having right now. So the first time we ever heard him speak was at the indictment for Florida. Next up, Fannie. Again, I just pulled her, Fannie Willis, who's the prosecuting attorney, the district attorney in Fulton County. And she said, I've been working on this case for 2.5 years because she heard the Brad Raffensperger tape. She went, I think he lives in Fulton County. That's my county. And she started investigating then. Now, Fannie is toughy. She's a toughie. And I say that with enormous respect. Again, we see the Mars on the point of the US moon. We don't have a time for her, but a noon chart I cast to see, about, it'll be 6 degrees. So that would give her an Aquarius moon too. And then all these planets appear in Scorpio, Mercury on the world point, her Pluto's in Libra on the world point. It trines Pallas Athena and Vesta, Grand Trine, right? And Pluto is coming to Vesta, the home and hearth planet. That's going to be there next year and the year after. So she has a Grand Trine in Aries. You can see all the big blue lines in the middle there. And she also has Jupiter on a world point. And she's well known and well respected as a prosecutor who does her work. Jupiter opposite the Saturn. And of course, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, December 20th of 2020, seems to be, from what I've been reading, the time when Trump decided to go rogue on his stuff. And that conjunction was at 0 Aquarius over here on her Vesta, forming a Grand Trine to the Pluto. Now, of course, Pluto's coming to that point. Been there already. We'll be there again in January. So her trial isn't happening until we're into Pluto and Aquarius. But Fannie has the the Pallas Athena is out of bounds, Justice, and her Vesta is out of bounds. So she has 2 out of bounds planets. And of course, Vesta defended the home and hearth. So she heard he lived in her county and she was paying attention. Someone came in my county to commit a crime. I am going to defend the home and hearth. I'm going to defend the citizens of Fulton, Georgia, the county of Fulton, Georgia. So, and I have a friend who's works in the intelligence departments, and they're all Scorpio Aquarius. We were talking about it at one point, and it was right after I'd started to study astrology, but she'd talked about it a little bit before. They came looking for her in college, like the government knows our birth dates, right? So they came and recruited her in college into the intelligence agency. And they like their Scorpios with Aquariuses because they're good spies. They're very cool under pressure and they don't bend. So all those Scorpio planets are reporting into that Mars. The Libra planets report into the Venus. They report into that Mars. This girl is, God, she can eat bullets. She's formidable. And yeah, so I've it's an interesting chart, and I'll be watching for, because she's been showing up a bit more in the news. And she's also very clarifying. When someone asks her a question where she really doesn't understand the nuance of it, she leans in a little and she asks for clarification of it. Like, what were you actually asking again? You can just see her mind working. And I still remember the first time I ever saw her was on Rachel Maddow. Rachel was nervous. Rachel was very, very nervous. And Rachel Maddow is not generally nervous, but she was nervous with Fannie Willis. And I was kind of like, well, that's interesting. Look at how nervous she is. And Fannie was very serious, very somber-minded, and very direct in her approach. And then she said something to her about, like, well, are you getting any threats? Fannie's like, oh, all the time, like like I don't know I'm black. And she laughed. And then Rachel, oh, like she actually smiled and laughed. Oh, okay, I can relax. I can laugh too. So this woman is seriously awesome. So I'm looking at her and going, you know, it's an impressive chart. And I hadn't looked her chart up until this week. And I like Jack's. I love Jack's chart because he's like a terrier. He's going to very tenacious, very solid. That Mars, answers to the Jupiter and Virgo, Jupiter, Pluto on that south node. It's got this very intense, passionate energy with that moon in Aquarius. He's able to think like a criminal thinks. I'm sure he has enormous intuitiveness. He goes, and then they did this and this and this, and follow the lines, follow the lines. And so he's got a brilliant chart too, and everybody universally respects him that has spoken about him in terms of his prosecutorial approach. But so we've got some interesting astrology ahead of us. So this is the first of a few, and neither of them have Ra's al Ghul in their charts. But Fanny, you can see, she has a Star David in there. See it in the fire and air? See the little? I've placided his houses, so it's a little bit distorted, but you can see the Grand Trine in fire. You can see the Grand Trine in air. And so I don't think she's up at bat right away, because I think this is going to be a sprawling Rico. A lot of people, a lot of players, a lot of mad people too. But she's got a chart that wins. So I would be really, I would be more nervous being under her gun, not to discount the federal people in DC, but this one's winning. So we'll see what happens. And so that is the new chapter of astrology and politics. So we'll add a little bit every week and kind of put it out there and go from there. We'll have a new moon ceremony on August 15th. Mark your calendars. And also you can sign up for Cupful of Stars, where I give you a daily podcast, a little bit about the stars, the energy in the heavens, and then also a list of timed aspect and a song, usually a nice song to help you work with the energy of the day. And so off we go. Have a great week of August 6th. And we'll be on indictment watch Tuesday, Wednesday. I think it gets handed up on Tuesday and dropped on Wednesday, but might be dropped on Tuesday. Have a good one. Bye.